Hey everybody, Ben here from DMC Films, and today we're talking about brushes. Which brushes to choose, and maybe which ones not to choose, depending on what you're doing. Now, to be honest, if you're working on something this small, you don't want to use a huge brush. You're not going to use something like this on something like this. It doesn't add up. You have to choose wisely, but also choose something that you may not have any knowledge of. You know what? I can't do this. I cannot do this today. It is way too nice of a day. We're doing this video outside. Now when you go to an art store, what you're probably going to notice is that there's a lot of brushes out there. And there's, you know, synthetic bristles and natural bristles. Which one's going to work for me? Well, to be honest, I don't know, because you know what? Different brushes. The fact is, the different brushes are going to work for different people. And honestly, I can't recommend exactly what you're going to use, per se, because, you know, everybody paints something different. However, I can give you a brief overview of what I use, because, you know, I get asked that, you know, every now and then, and it's kind of annoying after a while. So, here's just a basic overview of my brushes. First off, I'm going to pull these out with my hand because they're a little annoying. They're my two knives. Odds are you want to pick up a knife, even if you're just starting out painting. You can either choose a palette knife or a painting knife, or somewhere in between. There's all kinds of different shapes and sizes out there, and odds are you're gonna see something that'll probably inspire you, and something that you'll probably be able to use in your own work. Next, we have the mop brush, and its name, you know, it's pretty obvious. It's got a big mop end to it, and it's for all kinds of different things. A lot of times watercolor artists will use this to lay down a lot of water or a lot of color, you know, since watercolor. Now what I used to use this for was applying just a small amount of paint, using it to create sort of a stippling technique, which only works for a while until, you know, the bristles get saturated with either paint or water. This is also good for blending in very fine areas, and that's really what I use it for now. Next up is my old favorite, and that's the fan brush. I don't really use this so much anymore. I use it for grass now. I use it for blending, and that's about it. I used to use this more for trees and clouds. I don't do that so much anymore. It's also great for blending. You can get that real nice upward stroke. Fan brush. Finally, in the line of what I call specialty brushes is the liner brush, and the bristles on here are starting to get spread out a little bit. That happens if, you know, you leave your brushes in water too long. They start to spread, or just, you know, use them over time, they start to spread out. So that's usually why people buy new brushes over time. Probably really can't see it, but the bristles are about as thick as the, you know, stick itself. And yeah, liner brush, also called a script brush, depending on where you get it and what brand. Generally, you know, brushes vary very little between brand to brand, so it's normally not something you have to worry about. Now we're on to what I call the basic three. Now these I recommend you pick up if you're just a beginner, if you've never painted before, you have no idea what to choose, and let's say you're working on a canvas that's like 9 by 12. You can go for one just a little bit smaller than what I'm showing you. Okay, these three. First is the flat brush. The flat brush, as its name suggests, has no point to it. It's flat and also tapers down to a flat point. This is basically the all-around standard brush. When you think of paintbrush, you're probably thinking of one of these. Next we have the round brush. Now this is, if you're thinking of paintbrush, you could be thinking of one of these. In similar ways, it's tapered to a point. However, it's not tapered to a flat point, it's tapered to a round point. It's cylindrical. It's crimped that way. This is a great brush for literally anything you want to do. Anything from natural things like clouds to unnatural things like pipes. Finally, we have probably my second favorite brush next to the liner, and that's called the filbert. Now, in retrospect, I probably should have picked up my larger of the two so it shows up better on camera. I'll just move it in a little closer. Similar to the flat brush, it comes to a tapered point, and it's crimped flat. However, it has a rounded tip rather than a straight flat tip. You see me use this in my tutorial videos all the time for putting leaves on trees. The shadows and highlights video, I use this, I think, primarily. Might have been the only one I used, maybe one other. It's a great brush. Again, very, very versatile. Maybe it has not nearly as many applications as the flat or the round, but maybe half of one of them, not half of both of them combined. But it's a great brush. If you're just starting out painting, pick yourself up a filbert. It's definitely worth it. Now, at the risk of sounding biased, picking up paintbrushes is sort of in itself an art and something you have to learn, but there's really no way I can teach you that. I mean, when you go to the art store, experiment with different types of brushes. Pick yourself up a starter pack of like 5. Just play around with what works for you. If you think, oh, I wish my brush was this shape, odds are there's a shaped brush like that out there. There are dozens and dozens of different brushes out there for you to try. Just experiment, you know, do what works for you. I mean, there's no better advice that I can give to a young artist than to say, experiment, play around with what works for you. That's what I did, and that's how I've come up with my brush set. Really, it may look like I have a ton of brushes, but really I have just the same varieties of round and flat and all that. They're just old and have changed over time. They're not necessarily a flat brush. They might be a round brush now because the bristles spread out. Over time, you're going to accumulate brushes. Just so long as the bristles stay nice and soft, you can still use them. They just might change in the way you use them. So, for more tips, tutorials, art videos, films, please stay tuned to the DMC Films channel here on YouTube. See you guys next week.